Welcome back. I am going to be now covering almost the last part of this app, right? So it's going to be a part 3.2. So here on the diagram, you might be seeing 3.2, but then the actual video's naming would be different numbers because, for example, the part 3 actually would have, like even this part 3.1, I did it in 2 videos. I guess, and then this one I might be doing in up to 2 or 3 maybe, or 2 maximum, or 3 or 2, doesn't matter. So even for the story, for the storage and content delivery, which I consider this one as part 2, I did it in 3, I think, 3 parts. But so on the diagram, you might be seeing part 1, authentication, part 2, storage and content delivery, part 3 is the user interaction. But there will be several parts for each one anyways. So now we are going to this part. So in the previous video, what we did was we actually created an API gateway, a Lambda function, and then a DynamoDB table. And for the API gateway, we understand the different types of the APIs. The Lambda function, we added a code, I would say, and also an IAM role with full access to DynamoDB table. That's what we did, and it was actually a post method. So make sure you remember it's an HTTP post method, just because it's going to be as an HTTP post request because it's inserting likes in the DynamoDB table. Now we're going to create 5 more Lambda function. I know you will be thinking is that too many? But anyways, we'll be creating 5 different Lambda function, and then also definitely 5 other I would say 5 other API endpoints as well, or API gateway methods. So let's just go with the next one, which is loadLike. So one was you actually inserted a like, but when you're actually on the app, so let me show you the app really quickly as well, because I am already here. So I'm just going to sign in with one of the fake users. So here you go. So I hope it works. Yeah, it did work. So I go to the stories and I'm skip instruction, go to one of the stories in here. So let's just go to story number 6. So it's actually loading. Sometimes the app doesn't work well either. I think so it did work. Anyway, so as you can see, I'm going to like this thing, right? So this is being increased. So now what we did was, so this thing that we tapped like, it actually went through the API gateway and here. We did go through the API gateway to the Lambda function in DynamoDB table. It's being stored in DynamoDB table now. But since I see 4 likes in here, so this means we also need to get those number of likes from the DynamoDB table. And then to get those likes from DynamoDB table, I still need to send an HTTP, I would say, GET request from the app to the API gateway through the Lambda function, and then to the DynamoDB table. And then DynamoDB table will be serving back that to the to my app, right? So if I see these 4 likes or these 6 comments in here, this means that I have to be able to do that setup through an API gateway Lambda in DynamoDB, right? So for example, even if I click on this one, right? So in here, I'm seeing the users who actually liked it. So even seeing that one, I need a different one. So let me see for loading like. So this is loading the like, right? 4 likes. And then, so let me just go through these ones. Might be a bit easier for you to see it. So because I have given similar names, I have given similar names both to the front end function, to the Lambda function, into the API gateway. For example, if I go to a front end function, it will be also called loadLike. If I go to a Lambda function, I will have a similar name. And if I go to the API gateway method, I will have a similar name. Just because it kind of keeps things simple and convenient. Okay, so if I go to my Once again, so loading these likes is one thing. List users who liked it. So this was what I said, listing the users who liked it. So I need another setup of API gateway Lambda function to do this thing for me. And then load user like status. So for example, this thing is red. So this is story number 6. I liked it. It was gray before, but now it's red. So I have to navigate back and come back to story number 6. It shows that has been liked. So even just to see this shape of the color of the heart as red, that I have liked it, it's because of this load user like status. So that's another thing. For example, I go to another story, right? So this story, yeah, I have liked the story as well. So let me see if there's another story I haven't liked. So the story I haven't liked it. That's why it tells me that I haven't liked it, but if I click it, here you go, I liked it. But if I click it again, it might turn gray, but the number of likes wouldn't decrease, right? It shows that I have actually liked this story. And then the last two function, which is load comment and then a comment count. So first going to the comment count, right? So these comments, it shows 5 comments in there, right? So 5 comments, even just to see this number, it's because again of a API gateway Lambda function combination, and then actually combination of 3 things: a front end function, an API that sends an HTTP GET request through the Lambda function to the DynamoDB table, right? So if I show you my front-end code really quickly, it might look like this one, right? So for the so you can see as loadLike API, like status API, and then comment count, right? So if I'm going to come down here, insert like is what we talked about before. So now load like, so load like count. This is a function that sends an HTTP GET request, and then it adds the story ID and also the user ID to it, right? And then the Lambda function, if it goes through, it goes through the API gateway, and then the API gateway triggers Lambda function. Lambda function runs the code, and then actually gets that relevant information from the DynamoDB. And this is load user like status. This is another function I mentioned. And this is load comment count, which is this 5 comments in here. So here it is. Once again, it's actually a combination of this. So a front-end function on the app, and then an API send an HTTP post request to API gateway. API gateway triggers Lambda function, it runs the code, and then it fetches that information back from the DynamoDB table. And I actually have 2 different tables in the DynamoDB. One is for story like, another is for story comments, right? Because I just wanted to keep things, if I put everything in one table, it will be really confusing. But anyway, so that's, I think, so we did talk about it. So load comment count. So one is, yeah, we did talk about the load like, list users who liked it, load user like status, but we didn't mention the load comments because that's actually a separate page. For example, if I click on these things, right, it shows me the number of comments in here. So this is actually a different page, and it's actually here in story comments, right? So I have an API gateway URL at the top somewhere. Yeah, here you go. So it's load comments, actual the content of the comments, not just the comment count. And then here it is. This is the functions, the function that I have for load comment. And another thing you might be thinking, how I'm actually adding those comments to the backend. So this text has to be stored somewhere. Yes, it's stored, but it's stored in S3 because sometimes the comments might be longer. So I thought it's a good idea to have the entire content of the comments in the S3, but then I have at least 100 kilobytes, or maybe the first 100 characters of the comments as comment snippets in the DynamoDB table. And I'm going to show you that in a while, but just want to show you the front end. So yeah. And this is also the function where I have to upload comments to S3. So that's a function that uploads comments to S3, then upload data to S3. So the comment metadata, which user it is, in what time it is, it's being stored in DynamoDB. So also I have a get card user, but that's for a different thing. So I'm going to put this thing back in here, coming here. So what I'm going to do right now, I might not go to creating all of them because it is kind of the same thing. You create an API gateway Lambda function, and then you integrate the Lambda function with the API gateway. And then in the Lambda function, you make sure you actually add the name of the DynamoDB table. So now I'm going to show you the DynamoDB table for the comments, right? So if I come here, right, in here I have the story ID, I have the comment ID, and then for example, I'm going to click on one of those stories, right? So in here, actually for this partition key, I used the story ID, right? And for the sort key, I used the comment ID. I think so that was a bit, I would say, unwise on my end to use comment ID as the sort key. I should have used, I would say, maybe the username, because one user might be leaving multiple comments, right? But anyways, I will not go into more depth in here because I might make it confusing. Only if I had only the story ID, that would have been good enough as well. So now you can see the comment snippet is just the first part, right? And then created at is the date. And then I have the S3 key, and then I have the username. If I wanted to go to S3 and I show you where I'm saving those comments actual content, you're going to see that too. Okay, so the say this is the S3 bucket I was using. So you can see this is actually the text of the stories, but then I have a separate prefix or a folder where I'm actually storing the story comments, and it's actually based on each user, right? For example, if this is a user, they have like story number 5, and I'm going to click on this thing. Now you can see that one is the metadata of the story, of the comment, and then one is actual comments, right? So if I click on this one and I say open, right? So now this is the comment and that you see about that specific user, right? So, so for example, I'm a planet and my name is Venus. I really like reading your stories. I wish I could also have access to the libraries of the Earth, right? Looking for more. So this is, I would say, the actual text that's of the user comment that's being stored in S3, right? So if I go back, there also has to be, I would say, the metadata of the specifics. I click on the metadata and now see what the metadata says. So I'm going to open it. And it's actually the metadata is the story ID. There is the comment ID. There is the username. And there is actually the timing. So both the comment metadata is in the actual comment is being stored in S3 and also in DynamoDB. You might be definitely thinking like, what's the need of storing it both in DynamoDB table in comment ID? In S3, I would say it just, I was learning and I want to see, first I added it to the S3 bucket. Then I thought, no, I actually needed to have it in the DynamoDB table. So I added it to the DynamoDB table. Anyways, so let's just go back to our diagram and see what do we have here. So the next one I said I'm going to, since we created one, I would say post request, right? An HTTP post method. So I'm going to create one more, which is going to be an HTTP get request. So you can see the difference, but then I will not be creating all of those functions because the process and the steps is exactly the same. So let's just go with loadLike Lambda function, right? So I'm going to go back here. So we will be almost repeating exactly the same steps, right? So I'm going to come here to my functions. I'm going to create a function. And then this function will be called loadLike, and then 2. And then I'm going to use Python. Again, I'm going to let the Lambda function create a role for itself. I'm not going to go into advanced setting. It's not important. We'll create the function. And then I wanted to go to my previous function that actually has the load like thing in there because I need to use the same code. I cannot recreate the code. I mean, I might create it, but it might take time. So I'm just going to copy and paste this entire code into my next one. So this is loadLike original function that's actually for the app and it's working. And then loadLike 2 is the second one. So I'm going to paste it here. Just make sure you deploy the changes. And then one more thing I wanted to do is wanted to also copy and paste the story like, the test JSON, and I want to bring it here. I can call it test1, it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to save it. So right now, I might run the test. It might or might not work. So it actually didn't work out because we haven't integrated the API gateway as of now, right? So I'm just going to go back to the code. So you can see we don't have any API triggers for this Lambda function. So the next thing that we have to do is wanted to go to the API gateway. I actually made this thing, I would say, a bit organized because before I used to have a resource like, and that was directly inserting like, but then I actually created another endpoint and called it insert like too. So that's only for the insert. So I want to separate the comments from the likes, right? So I'm going to go back to the like. You have to be at this level in order to create another, I would say, a method. So you don't have, for example, if you're here, it will not work out. It will not be organized. It might work, but it will not be organized. So you have to come here at this level, and at this level then you have to create another method, and this method now is a get method. It's not a post method. Make sure you have this thing lambda proxy integration on, and then here you have to say load like to, right? So here you go, load like to is this is the one. Everything else looks good, yeah. And then you create the method. The method is now actually, see, that's why it has to be, I should first have created, I would say, a resource before actually creating the method. So that's a mistake. That's good I made it. So now you know, I'm going to delete this thing again. So I don't want to have it first. I have to create a resource. And then that resource, I have to call it load like. It's a good way to organize your resources and method because it makes things clear and simple. So I want to create the resource, and now within that resource, I'm going to create a get method, right? So I'm going to go back here. I want to create a get method proxy, and then I will put load like to. So this is the one. Everything else looks good. So here you go. Now I have likes. Within the like, I have insert like to, and I have a load like to. Even this one, I should have called it load like to, right? Let me just do that because if I don't, then it will kind of make everything disorganized. Anyways, so first I come here, I want to create a new resource, and that resource, once again, is called load like to. I created that resource. Awesome. It makes sense. Now within this one, I'm going to create a get method. I wanted to do it quickly as you already know the steps. I wanted to put load like to. This is the one. And then I create a method. So awesome. Okay, so now you have a get, you had a post method before in the insert, and now for the load like, you actually have a get method. And if I go to the user integration, this is load like comment, Lambda function, it's being here. So let me just refresh this page. Since I created two API gateways, it might show those triggers already in there, but I would want to actually delete the ones that I have deleted them before, right? I'm going to delete these two. And one thing, once I created those methods and those resources, I have to deploy it as well, right? So it has been deployed before, but it's a good practice to actually deploy it every time you add new resources and methods to it, right? I'm going to refresh this page, right? I hope I only see one API trigger now. Yes, I actually see only one. And then this is now the API URL that I have. Now, the next thing for us is actually to test if it's working or not. So if I go to my DynamoDB table, right? And then the DynamoDB table was actually for the story likes. And then the story likes is actually like two, not this one. It should be this one. So I have 3 items. So now I want to see that for story number 3, how many likes do I have? Because it's actually loading or fetching or retrieving the number of likes for a certain story by a certain user. So for this to do, I have this loadLike Lambda already. I think so. I already got the test event. Here you go. So I want to know for the story number 1, I want to know how many likes it has received, right? So now I have to run the test. I hope it works. Let me see why it doesn't work. So error message name client is not identified. I am going to do something. Okay, here you go. What I did, I think I didn't change. Yeah, I didn't change the DynamoDB table name. So if you don't change it, then it's not going to work. So I wanted to go here. I want to take this DynamoDB table name. Wanted to come to my Lambda function, and I have to change this name. Yes, it's being changed. Now I have to deploy it. So it worked, and now I want to test it. I hope it works this time. It's an error message, client error not defined. So line 26, Lambda error client. So let me just see what I have on line 26. If I can figure it out quickly, I will be doing it here on the live. If not, then I'm going to stop it, and then I will see what's the missing. So it stays number 26. I'm actually going to stop it. And then I'm going to stop the recording, and I will be back with you once I figure out, and I will tell you how I did it. Welcome back. So I just figured out there was an issue with something important that I didn't yet. But then I took my error message, right? I took my error message, put as a screenshot. So this is also me telling you how I'm actually doing my I would say the way I write my codes and for Lambda function, if I get an error, how do I resolve it? So I took a screenshot of the error, right? And then I took a screenshot of the DynamoDB table structure. Then I added my Lambda code in there. And then my question was actually that below is my Lambda function code. It attaches this test error in the DynamoDB table screenshot. Please help me fix the issue, right? And then they told me that I haven't but so even this error that I was seeing here, it was not defined. This error that I was getting is I cannot get anything, I would say, meaningful from it, right? And then it told me that you have to add something, the protocol exception client error thing. So with that, when I added it, it actually gave me a different kind of message, right? So let me just go back to my Lambda function, and then it told me, so an error occurred, access denied exception in calling get item operation. So now I think it's because when we created the Lambda function, we didn't add an IAM role for this DynamoDB, for this Lambda function to be able to talk to DynamoDB table. So let me just see if what I say is actually right. So this is the role, so loadLike to role. And I want to see if I have actually a okay, here you go. I actually don't have in the permission policy, I haven't added the DynamoDB table policy. So I'm just going to do that. So DynamoDB full access, and I'm going to run the test after I add this permission policy, and I hope it actually works. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to figure it out again and see what's the issue, right? So this is good. Now it's kind of done. So I'm not sure, it's going to refresh the page. So let's see, you don't need to refresh the page once you update the role, but anyways, I somehow did it. So I'm going to deploy it. Yeah. And I'm going to test it. I hope it actually works. Here you go. It actually works. So for, so in my test, let me just go back to my test, right? So in my test, so I wanted to know for story number 3, how many likes it has. So if you go to our DynamoDB table, story number 3 only has 1 like, right? And so for, and let me just see, let's just see for story number 2, how many, I mean, it's for story number 2, how many likes are there, right? So I wanted to go, actually I wanted to go to my other function. So it was called insert like 2, right? So I want to go here and actually wanted to add a few more likes through the test event to, for example, for story number 2, I wanted to, for story number 2, that's it. I wanted to add a few more likes. So I wanted to save the test. and then test it. So here you go. I think so it did add some more testing to it. I'm just going to go back here and then just run a few more tests to see if it's going to be adding more, I would say, likes in there. So for story number 2, let's see if, oh, actually, this change didn't increase. It's only 1 like. It didn't increment it. So I don't know why. I might figure it out and let you know later. But for example, if I'm going to go back to my insert and then in my test, I wanted to say for story number 5, right? This is another story I wanted to add. I want to save it and test it. And now I want to go back to my, I would say, DynamoDB table, refresh it, and see here you go. The story number 5 is added. These likes are not being incremented, which they should. In my actual app, it does work that way, but there might be certain things because it's actually not linked to my front-end code and everything. So you did see they actually copy and pasted the exact same Lambda function code into my test Lambda functions. So if it's not working, there might be an issue. I figure it out and let you know. One reason that I think it's because the entire setup is not integrated. It might be because I did certain things in the front-end code that actually incremented. Since I'm not integrating the front-end, it's just me testing it. So that's why it doesn't increment. But you can see that actually adding more likes to the DynamoDB table if I do it through the Lambda function. But anyways, I wanted to go back here and now I wanted to know the number of like for story number 5. I wanted to save it and then test it. Let's see what it says. Yeah, so the story number 5 also has 1 like. So I think that's it for this. So if I go back to our flowchart, we covered creation of an API gateway Lambda function in DynamoDB table. And then we also did another one, and that was a post request because it was inserting like. They needed a similar setup, but this time with a GET request, API gateway Lambda function in DynamoDB table. We tested the function and it actually worked. So I am going to leave this thing for now. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, I will be more than happy to receive them from you. Have a lovely day. See you again.